June 12th, 2024, 3:31 p.m., Silver Wrench Auto Shop, San Antonio, Texas. What the hell is that? Eduardo Vasquez, the cartel's transport driver, pointed at the pickup truck behind the building where Joe Montalvo had been loading thermal containers. $21 million in drug cartel cash sat in the truck bed, barely concealed under a work tarp. Carlos Restrepo, the cartel's enforcement lieutenant, burst through the shop entrance with his gun drawn. "Step away from the vehicle, viejo. Now." Joe Montalvo, 61-year-old auto mechanic, former Navy electronics specialist, widowed father struggling to pay his daughter's law school tuition, stood frozen next to the black Chevrolet Suburban. The final empty container trembled in his hands. 13 sandbag decoys were already sealed inside the vehicle's hidden money compartments. One container of real cartel money, $1.5 million, lay exposed on his workbench. Raul, the cartel guard who was supposed to be napping, was reaching for his weapon. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now let's get back to the story. "I can explain," Joe said, knowing there was no explanation that would keep him alive. He had spent 18 months planning the perfect theft from the Mexican drug cartel that used his auto shop to launder $84 million every quarter while paying him $52,000 a year to service their armored vehicles. Every detail calculated, every risk measured. His daughter Sofia desperately needed money for law school. His son Miguel's garage business was being destroyed by cartel protection rackets. The plan was supposed to be invisible: steal the money, replace it with weighted sandbags, and vanish before anyone discovered the substitution. Except Eduardo had returned 23 minutes early from lunch. Except Carlos had shown up from Mexico a day ahead of schedule. Except everything was going wrong in the final 30 seconds. Eduardo kicked the tarp off the truck bed, revealing 14 thermal-sealed containers holding the cartel's biggest cash transport of the quarter. "Boss, he's got all of it. Every fucking dollar. We were moving to Chicago." Carlos smiled coldly, his gun aimed directly at Joe's chest. "You know what we do to thieves who steal from the Restrepo organization, Joe?" This was the moment when Joe Montalvo, the invisible mechanic nobody ever noticed, the man who fixed cars and asked no questions, had to become something else entirely, or die trying. This is the story of how that moment became the beginning, not the end, of the greatest theft in Texas history. But it started 18 months earlier, with a routine oil change that would expose the biggest money laundering operation on the Texas-Mexico border. The blazing Texas afternoon made the concrete floor of Silver Wrench Auto Shop feel like a frying pan. Joe wiped sweat from his forehead as the same black Suburban with plates JZX542 rolled into Bay 3 for the fourth time in 12 months. "Routine maintenance," said the driver, Eduardo, handing Joe the keys. The vehicle looked pristine, barely broken in, but Joe's trained eye caught details others missed. Reinforced floor mounts, modified suspension, a custom fuel system that didn't match the factory specs. During the oil change, Joe's magnetic tool clanged against something metallic under the chassis. A GPS tracker, an encrypted flash drive, sealed in an anti-corrosion capsule. He didn't touch it, but now he knew. These weren't regular customers. His phone buzzed, Sofia calling from law school. "Dad, tuition's due next month. I can defer another semester if you need time." Joe watched through the office window as cartel members counted cash in thick stacks, rubber bands snapping. His daughter was sacrificing her dreams while these men made millions moving poison across borders. "Don't defer anything, mija. Daddy's got it figured out." Using his Navy electronics training, Joe began documenting irregularities. VIN numbers that didn't match registration papers, hidden compartments in fuel tanks and door panels, communication devices wired into dashboard electronics, modified exhaust systems designed to mask engine signatures. After 6 weeks of careful observation, Joe discovered the pattern. Every fourth vehicle carried money, not drugs. The Suburban with plates JZX542 was the primary cash transport, moving $21 million every quarter through Arkansas to Chicago. Carlos Restrepo, the cartel lieutenant, appeared in the doorway. "You're good with your hands, viejo. Just remember, you fix cars, not ask questions. People who ask questions don't fix cars anymore." Joe nodded respectfully, but his mind was already racing with possibilities he'd never considered before. After hours, Joe's modest auto shop became a surveillance center. Hidden cameras disguised as security equipment recorded everything. He studied cartel protocols for 6 months, learning how they inspected vehicles before and after service, their communication patterns, security weaknesses, vulnerable moments when guards relaxed their vigilance. By day, Joe remained the quiet mechanic everyone expected. By night, he mapped the largest money laundering operation in Texas. 23 modified vehicles in rotation, $84 million transported quarterly through his shop, connections to 14 different cartel cells across the Southwest, each with their own schedules and security protocols. The breaking point came when Miguel called at 2 in the morning, voice shaking with fear and rage. "Dad, they vandalized the shop again. Broke every window this time. Spray painted, pay protection or close across the front wall. I don't know what to do anymore." Joe realized the cartel wasn't just his customers. They were systematically destroying his family's future. These bastards took everything from working people and gave nothing back except fear and intimidation. He began subtle modifications during legitimate repairs. Remote access points installed in cartel vehicles, hidden behind dashboard panels where nobody would look. Duplicate keys created for all transport vehicles using impressions taken during routine maintenance. Exact locations of hidden compartments mapped and memorized down to the millimeter. Methods developed to access sealed money containers without leaving traces of tampering. The test run came during routine maintenance on a smaller transport vehicle, a modified Ford F-150 that Carlos had brought in for transmission work. Joe had observed this truck 3 times before and knew it carried approximately $500,000 in a custom compartment behind the rear axle. This would be his proof of concept. For 2 weeks, Joe prepared with military precision. He collected sand from 3 different construction sites, mixing grain sizes to match the density of cash bundles. Using a precision scale borrowed from a jewelry repair shop, he created test bags weighing exactly 2.2 pounds, the weight of $50,000 in used 20s and hundreds. He practiced with thermal sealing equipment purchased through Navy surplus contacts, learning to replicate the cartel's industrial-grade container seals. The psychological preparation was harder than the technical work. Joe spent sleepless nights visualizing every step, every possible mistake. His hands shook the first time he held the thermal sealer, imagining Carlos discovering tampered containers. But his Navy training kicked in. Compartmentalize the fear, focus on the mission, execute with precision. November 15th, the F-150 arrived at 3 p.m. for scheduled transmission service. Carlos brought 2 guards this time, both armed. Joe's heart hammered as he lifted the truck on the hydraulic lift, knowing that 50 feet below him sat $500,000 in cartel cash. "How long for the transmission?" Carlos asked, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking signs. 2 hours minimum. Gonna need to drop the whole unit to check the torque converter. The guards settled in the waiting room with energy drinks and Mexican radio. Carlos left to handle business across town. Joe was alone with the money. Working underneath the truck, Joe located the hidden access panel exactly where his surveillance had indicated. The compartment was sophisticated, magnetically sealed, thermally insulated, accessed through a false differential housing that looked completely legitimate. His fingers traced the edges, feeling for the release mechanism he'd studied in photographs. The container opened with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Inside, 10 vacuum-sealed packages of cash, each marked with coded symbols Joe couldn't read. His target was the smallest package, positioned where removal would be least noticeable. He photographed everything with a hidden camera before touching anything. $50,000 felt heavier than expected. Compressed bills creating a dense, warm package that represented more money than Joe made in a year. His hands trembled as he sliced open the thermal seal with a surgical blade, revealing stacks of used 20s and hundreds held together with rubber bands. The substitution required perfect execution. Joe removed exactly half the cash, $25,000, and replaced it with identically sized sandbags wrapped in plastic. The remaining money was resealed using his thermal equipment, the package restored to its original dimensions and weight. To casual inspection, nothing had changed. But Joe knew Carlos would test the packages. Using intelligence gathered from previous observations, Joe anticipated the security protocols. He left deliberate imperfections, Slight wrinkles in the plastic that matched normal handling, fingerprint smudges in expected locations, even the correct magnetic signature from bills stored near the truck's electrical systems. The real test came when Carlos returned. He personally inspected the truck while Joe worked on the transmission, running magnetic scanners under the chassis, checking weight distribution with a mechanic's sense developed over decades of criminal logistics. Everything looked normal to you, viejo. Normal transmission job. Torquey converter was shot, but I got her fixed. Shift's smooth now. Carlos nodded, apparently satisfied. The truck left with its compromised cargo, carrying Joe's sandbags toward whatever destination awaited cartel money. For 3 days, Joe monitored police scanners and cartel communications, expecting sirens, expecting violence, expecting his world to explode. Nothing happened. On the 4th day, Joe's surveillance cameras captured the same F-150 returning for unrelated service. Carlos seemed relaxed, even friendly. The test had passed every security check. The money had been delivered, counted, and accepted without question. Joe had proven something that changed everything. The cartel's security was beatable. Their confidence in their own systems created blind spots that a patient, skilled opponent could exploit. They trusted their technology more than their instincts, their procedures more than their paranoia. Standing in his empty shop that evening, Joe stared at the $25,000 in stolen cartel money. It represented proof that ordinary people could defeat extraordinary criminals when they combined patience, skill, and careful planning. The money would go towards Sophia's education, but more importantly, it had shown Joe that the impossible was merely difficult. He'd beaten their system without them ever knowing they'd been beaten. His reputation as reliable old mechanic became his greatest strategic asset. Cartel members joked, "Joe's like furniture, always there, never causes problems, does good work cheap." During a late-night service call, Joe overheard Carlos planning to eliminate security risks in the operation. Names weren't mentioned, but Joe realized his window for action was closing fast. The cartel was preparing to clean house, and anyone with access to their secrets would become a liability. Joe discovered that JZX 542 would transport the quarter's biggest haul, $21 million, on June 12th. Perfect timing. The money needed to reach Chicago before a major cartel summit where territorial disputes would be settled with cash payments and territorial agreements. Sophia's law school sent final notice. Payment required by June 15th or enrollment canceled. No further extensions available. Miguel's garage received a second vandalism warning, this time with photos of his wife and children. Joe's family was running out of time and options. Joe spent months perfecting his approach with methodical precision. Weighted sandbags created to exactly match cash container dimensions, tested repeatedly to ensure identical weight distribution. Industrial resealing equipment acquired through Navy surplus contacts to restore thermal container seals without detection. Delayed release GPS trackers programmed to mask theft timing for exactly 48 hours. Escape vehicle prepared with hidden compartments designed using his electronics expertise. The decoy system depended on sophisticated misdirection tactics. Real money would be replaced with sandbags of identical weight and thermal signature. Industrial seals replicated using professional equipment that cost him 3 months' salary. GPS trackers repositioned to show normal transport routes through predetermined checkpoints. Evidence carefully planted pointing to rival Sinaloa cartel involvement, including authentic cartel symbols and false witness accounts. Intelligence gathering revealed the precise transport schedule through careful observation and pattern analysis. Suburban arrives at exactly 2:30 p.m. for brake maintenance. Driver Eduardo takes 45-minute lunch break at nearby diner, always ordering the same meal and sitting at the same corner booth. Only one guard remains, Raul, who consistently naps in the waiting room chair during the afternoon heat. Money containers accessible through modified fuel tank accessed during legitimate brake repair work that required lifting the vehicle. Joe calculated he had exactly 90 minutes to remove 14 thermal containers, weighing approximately 30 pounds each, replace them with identical weighted decoys, reseal all access points without leaving tool marks, and transfer real money to his prepared escape vehicle parked behind the building where security cameras had convenient blind spots. Carlos announced a surprise security upgrade during a staff meeting. New protocols start next week. Every vehicle gets full electronic scan after service. No exceptions. Anyone finds problems, they call me immediately. Joe's window of opportunity had slammed shut. It was now or never. June 12th, 2:30 p.m. Summer heat drove ambient temperature to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, sending everyone indoors seeking air conditioning. Joe's assistant had called in sick with food poisoning, leaving him alone in the shop. Carlos was supposedly in Mexico for a high-level cartel meeting. Only guard Raul was assigned to watch the Suburban during the routine maintenance window. JZX 542 arrived exactly on schedule for brake pad replacement, mechanical problems that would justify the extended service time Joe needed. Driver Eduardo headed to lunch at his usual diner, completely unaware that Joe had been studying his habits for 18 months. Raul settled into the waiting room chair for his predictable afternoon nap, just as he'd done during every previous service appointment. 2:47 p.m., Joe disconnected the fuel tank access panel with practiced precision, using legitimate tools and following standard procedures that wouldn't raise suspicion if anyone was watching. 2:51 p.m., located thermal containers in hidden compartments behind false panels that looked like standard automotive components but concealed the cartel's fortune. 2:53 p.m., began careful removal of the first money container, hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was stealing from the most dangerous criminal organization in Texas. 2:58 p.m., transferred $1.5 million in cash to his waiting pickup truck parked behind the building, each movement calculated to avoid security camera coverage. The containers were heavier than expected, each one requiring both hands and careful maneuvering through tight spaces designed to conceal their contents. Joe's Navy training showed as he worked with surgical precision learned during 20 years of military service. Each container removed and immediately replaced with an identical sandbag prepared over months of careful planning. Thermal seals restored using his industrial heating gun acquired through surplus military contacts. GPS trackers repositioned to maintain normal readings that wouldn't trigger security alerts. Weight distribution perfectly balanced to prevent any handling differences that might alert suspicious drivers. 3:15 p.m. Halfway through the transfer, Raul stirred in his chair, forcing Joe to freeze until the guard settled back into sleep. 3:22 p.m., Eduardo returned early from lunch, 23 minutes ahead of schedule, forcing Joe to stall while finishing the final container swap with $19 million already loaded in his truck. Taking longer than usual, Joe. Tough brake job. Calipers were seized solid from all this heat and dust. Almost done now. Give me 10 more minutes. 3:25 p.m., Joe had to continue working normally while Eduardo watched, maintaining conversation about automotive problems while transferring the final $1.5 million. 3:28 p.m. Raul woke up and wanted to inspect the work, walking around the vehicle while Joe finished sealing the final access panel. Looks good, viejo. You always do clean work. Never had problems with anything you fix. 3:31 p.m. Another cartel vehicle arrived unexpectedly for unscheduled service, but Joe maintained perfect composure while completing final security measures. Professional excellence paid off exactly as planned. Joe finished the brake job flawlessly using genuine replacement parts and standard procedures. The Suburban drove perfectly with no handling differences or mechanical issues. All systems checked normal on routine diagnostics. The theft was completely invisible to everyone except Joe himself. As the Suburban left the shop with its worthless sandbag cargo, Joe noticed Carlos's distinctive black Mercedes in the parking lot across the street. The cartel lieutenant had returned early from Mexico and was watching the shop through tinted windows, possibly suspicious of the unusual timing. Joe knew he had 48 hours maximum before the cartel opened containers in Chicago and discovered the theft. Every minute counted in his carefully planned escape sequence. Carlos entered the shop with his usual intimidating presence. Eduardo said you took extra time today. Everything okay, viejo? Joe showed him the difficult brake job documentation and brake parts covered in authentic wear and debris. Carlos examined the paperwork and seemed satisfied with the legitimate maintenance explanation before leaving without further questions. Joe worked normally for the rest of the day, servicing 2 more vehicles with routine maintenance, while $21 million in cartel cash sat 50 feet away in his pickup truck. At exactly 6 p.m. shop closing time, Joe began his carefully rehearsed erasure protocol. All surveillance footage from the past 24 hours was wiped using administrative access codes he'd acquired during legitimate security system maintenance. Hidden cameras and GPS tracking equipment removed without leaving installation traces. Documentation of cartel vehicle modifications destroyed using industrial shredders. Evidence planted pointing to rival Sinaloa cartel involvement, including authentic symbols and communication intercepts he'd collected over months of surveillance. Joe called Sofia from a prepaid phone. "Emergency family meeting tonight. Don't ask questions, just come home immediately." He transferred $100,000 to her account for law school tuition with transaction codes that would survive federal investigation. Miguel received $50,000 in detailed escape instructions. "Take Maria and the kids to your uncle in Denver tonight. Don't pack anything suspicious. Just leave like you're going on vacation. Don't come back for 6 months minimum." Joe's misdirection strategy was professional grade, learned from Navy intelligence training. Fake intelligence about Sinaloa cartel planning the heist, planted through channels the original cartel would discover during their investigation. Rival cartel symbols planted near money transport routes using authentic materials. False witness reports of Mexican license plates and Sinaloa operatives in the area. Financial records showing Joe's apparent gambling debts to Sinaloa loan sharks, complete with documentation that would pass forensic accounting investigation. 11:47 p.m., Joe loaded the money into his specially prepared RV and began driving north toward the Canadian border using routes mapped over 18 months of preparation. 11:52 p.m., crossed into New Mexico using back roads that avoided highway cameras and Border Patrol checkpoints. 1:30 a.m., abandoned the RV at a prepared location in the wilderness and switched to a sedan with different license plates and false registration documents. Joe's escape route was methodical and drew on decades of military training. False identity documents prepared over 18 months using contacts from his Navy service. Multiple vehicle switches planned to break any surveillance patterns. Cash divided into 14 separate hiding spots to prevent total loss if discovered. Travel through Montana wilderness using routes that avoided electronic monitoring and populated areas. At 3:15 a.m., Joe's phone rang one final time. "Carlos, something's wrong with the Chicago delivery. I'm sending teams to check every vehicle you worked on this week." Joe turned off the phone, removed the battery, and threw both pieces out the window into a river. Chicago Cartel opened the containers during routine inspection and found carefully weighted sandbags instead of $21 million in cash. Carlos received the emergency call. "Your mechanic just stole $21 million. Find him immediately or you're dead by morning." FBI intercepted cartel communications about the major theft through ongoing surveillance operations. Agent Maria Santos realized this unprecedented breach could be their chance to infiltrate and destroy the money laundering network they've been tracking for 3 years. While cartels mobilized search teams across Texas, Joe was already crossing into Canada using identity documents that had taken years to perfect through Navy intelligence contacts. His military training in escape and evasion was paying dividends in the civilian world. Carlos mobilized 200 cartel members across 4 states in the largest manhunt in organization history. Search teams systematically examined Joe's apartment, auto shop, and family locations looking for evidence or hiding places. Technical specialists analyzed vehicles for hidden surveillance equipment using electronic scanners. Suspected rivals were tortured for inside information about competing operations. A $5 million bounty was placed on Joe's head with authorization for immediate execution. Joe's escape plan specifically accounted for predictable cartel response patterns. Multiple false identities led searchers to wrong locations in different states. Planted evidence strengthened the rival cartel theory through authentic Sinaloa materials. Financial records showed apparent gambling debts to Sinaloa loan sharks with documentation that would survive investigation. Witnesses reported seeing Joe with known rival operatives at times that matched the theft timeline. The deception worked exactly as intended. Cartels started fighting each other instead of searching for the real thief. Bodies piled up across 3 states as groups settled scores over the theft and territorial violations. Internal cartel warfare consumed resources and attention that should have been focused on finding Joe. Sofia and Miguel entered FBI protection after cartel teams targeted Joe's family members for interrogation. Federal agents convinced them their father was probably dead, murdered by whichever cartel faction had discovered his involvement in the theft. Joe reached Portugal via Iceland, using merchant marine connections established during his Navy service 20 years earlier. He was now 6,000 miles from the crime scene with no extradition treaty covering his specific circumstances. FBI agent Santos methodically pieced together the real story through forensic analysis and surveillance records. Joe was never connected to any cartel operations beyond legitimate automotive repair services. His technical skills and inside access made the perfect theft possible without outside assistance. Evidence pointed to extensive inside knowledge of transport schedules and security protocols. Local mechanic shop records clearly showed the pattern of cartel vehicles and timing that enabled the operation. Agent Santos discovered Joe's true identity and approximate location through international intelligence cooperation. She faced an unprecedented choice: arrest the thief and lose the biggest cartel investigation in FBI history, or let him escape and use his intelligence to destroy the entire criminal organization. Joe established Joe Montalvo's Marine Repair in a coastal Portuguese village where American tourists were common but not memorable. He fixed boat engines with the same precision and attention to detail he'd once applied to cartel vehicles, earning local trust through reliable work and fair prices. Agent Santos realized Joe represented the key to dismantling the cartel's entire money laundering network. His theft had exposed operational details that 3 years of federal investigation hadn't uncovered. His intelligence value far exceeded the monetary loss to the criminal organization. Joe's daily routine in Portugal was deliberately mundane and culturally appropriate, repairing fishing boat engines for local fishermen who paid in cash and asked no questions about immigration status, playing chess with retired Portuguese naval officers who appreciated his professional knowledge, speaking broken Portuguese with a Cuban accent, claiming to be a political refugee seeking quiet retirement, living in a modest apartment above the marine shop that matched his claimed income level. Beneath the shop floor, Joe constructed a climate-controlled vault containing the $21 million, organized in vacuum-sealed containers with detailed inventory logs and temperature monitoring. The installation looked like standard boat hull storage to casual inspection. Joe's deception continued working perfectly in America. Mexican cartels blamed each other for the theft and responded with escalating violence. The resulting warfare killed 47 people across 3 states as organizations settled scores and eliminated suspected traitors. Federal law enforcement gained unprecedented intelligence about cartel operations through intercepted communications and captured personnel. Agent Santos established long-distance surveillance of Joe through Portuguese law enforcement cooperation, documenting his new life while building a comprehensive case against the cartel network he'd exposed through his theft. Carlos arrived in Portugal with 2 professional assassins, following intelligence tips about Joe's possible location. Joe spotted the surveillance team immediately using techniques learned during Navy intelligence training and prepared his predetermined contingency response plan. Joe had systematically become part of the Portuguese coastal community through genuine relationships and cultural integration. Local police chief Manuel Ribeiro considered him a valuable community member and personal friend. The villagers would instinctively protect him against foreign threats if circumstances required collective action. Carlos confronted Joe at the marina while he was repairing a fishing boat engine for a local family. "You think you can steal from us and hide here forever, old man?" Joe responded with perfect calm learned from decades of military training. "I think you're looking for the wrong person, friend. I've been fixing boat engines here for 5 years." Joe presented Carlos with comprehensive documentation proving Joe Montalvo had established legal residence in Portugal 5 years earlier, complete with tax records, business licenses, and community references. The false identity was professionally perfect, backed by Portuguese intelligence services who understood his real value to international law enforcement cooperation. Agent Santos faced an unprecedented decision: arrest Joe and lose the most important cartel case in FBI history, or allow him to disappear permanently and use his intelligence to destroy the entire criminal organization through legal prosecution. Agent Santos offered Joe complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for everything he knew about cartel operations, including 18 months of detailed surveillance data that represented the most comprehensive intelligence ever gathered on money laundering activities. Joe's intelligence revealed a vast criminal network of 147 cartel vehicles operating across 8 states. Money laundering routes worth $2.3 billion annually flowing through legitimate businesses. Systematic corruption in 23 law enforcement agencies at local, state, and federal levels. Direct connections to 14 Mexican cartel families with specific operational responsibilities and territorial agreements. FBI launched Operation Grease Monkey, using Joe's intelligence as the foundation for the largest organized crime investigation in agency history. Simultaneous raids across 4 states executed with military precision. 89 arrests including major cartel leaders, corrupt officials, and money laundering specialists. $400 million in seized assets, including vehicles, properties, and financial accounts. Complete dismantling of the money transport network that had operated undetected for over a decade. Carlos was executed by his own organization for losing the money and exposing the entire operation to federal investigation. Joe's deception had worked so perfectly that the cartel never discovered the real source of their exposure, instead eliminating their own personnel in paranoid internal purges. Portuguese authorities agreed to provide permanent protection for Joe in exchange for his cooperation in European money laundering investigations that connected to American cartel operations. International law enforcement cooperation reached unprecedented levels of effectiveness. Joe testified via secure video link from a Portuguese government facility, his identity protected by international agreement, his location classified at the highest security levels. His evidence provided the foundation for convicting 67 cartel members on federal racketeering charges, with sentences ranging from 20 years to life imprisonment. Sofia and Miguel visited Joe in Portugal under federal protection. Amazed by his transformation from struggling auto mechanic to international fugitive hero whose actions had saved countless lives and destroyed a criminal empire. Cartel assets seized by FBI funded comprehensive victim compensation programs administered through the Justice Department. Joe's theft ultimately helped hundreds of families affected by drug violence, human trafficking, and money laundering operations across the Southwest. The mechanic who broke the cartel became international news coverage that inspired similar operations by law enforcement agencies worldwide. Joe's story demonstrated how ordinary citizens with extraordinary skills could effectively fight organized crime when supported by proper intelligence and legal frameworks. Joe used his mechanical expertise to help Portuguese Coast Guard intercept drug smuggling boats operating in European waters. He was continuing to fight the same cartels from a different geographic position, using his skills for legitimate law enforcement purposes. A mysterious package arrived at Joe's shop containing his original Navy service medal, sent by someone who knew his true identity and wanted to acknowledge his service to both military and civilian communities. Chapter 9: The Legacy. Joe's intelligence continued producing investigative results years after the initial operation. FBI used his comprehensive data to prevent cartel expansion into 12 new territories across the United States, saving communities from drug trafficking and associated violence. Sofia became a prominent immigration attorney specializing in cartel victim cases, using money from her father's supposed life insurance settlement to fund her education and practice. She helped hundreds of families Joe's intelligence had indirectly protected through successful prosecutions and asset forfeitures. Miguel completely rebuilt his garage business as a specialty shop for armored vehicle modification, serving law enforcement agencies. The cartel protection racket threat was permanently eliminated through the comprehensive prosecutions enabled by Joe's intelligence gathering. Joe's marine repair business became an unofficial cover for helping Portuguese authorities track drug smuggling operations, attempting to establish European footholds for American cartel organizations. His automotive and electronics expertise proved equally valuable for maritime law enforcement applications. Agent Santos's unprecedented success with Operation Grease Monkey led to promotion as director of the FBI's newly created Cartel Financial Intelligence Unit. Her career advancement directly resulted from Joe's decision to cooperate with federal law enforcement rather than simply disappearing with stolen money. Other cartel organizations attempted to rebuild the destroyed money laundering network using different routes and methods. Joe's intelligence helped Portuguese and American authorities stay consistently ahead of these adaptation efforts through predictive analysis and international cooperation. Joe's case study became required curriculum at law enforcement academies worldwide. The Grease job was recognized as the definitive textbook example of how ordinary citizens with specialized skills could effectively fight organized crime when properly supported by legal institutions. Joe established an anonymous scholarship fund for children of cartel violence victims, using carefully laundered portions of the stolen money to help break generational cycles of crime and poverty in affected communities. Portuguese villagers gradually learned elements of Joe's remarkable story Through carefully managed information release, they took genuine pride in protecting the American hero who had fought dangerous criminals and won against impossible odds. Joe received periodic classified updates from Agent Santos about ongoing cartel activities and prosecutions. His original intelligence network remained invaluable for supporting new investigations and preventing criminal organization resurgence. A mysterious young woman appeared in the village asking detailed questions about Joe Montalvo, using information suggested inside knowledge of Joe's real identity and criminal history that nobody outside law enforcement circles should possess. Chapter 10. Full Circle. The mysterious Mexican woman was Isabella Restrepo, daughter of the deceased cartel lieutenant Carlos. She wasn't seeking revenge for her father's death. She was desperately seeking redemption for her family's extensive criminal legacy and personal complicity in cartel operations. Isabella revealed her father's final words before his execution by cartel leadership. The mechanic was right about everything. We became monsters who destroyed innocent families. Someone had to stop us before we killed more children. She provided additional intelligence about remaining cartel operations and leadership structures. Combined intelligence from Joe and Isabella exposed the last major cartel money laundering system operating independently of the original network. FBI coordinated international operations that seized $800 million in assets and eliminated the final remnants of the criminal organization. Joe could return to America as a celebrated hero with full federal protection and media attention, but deliberately chose to remain in Portugal, where his new life had developed genuine meaning beyond the spectacular theft that started everything. Joe revealed to Isabella that beneath his workshop floor lay the original $21 million, virtually untouched except for family educational expenses and anonymous victim compensation programs that had helped hundreds of affected families rebuild their lives. Joe and Isabella established the Carlos Restrepo Redemption Foundation, using the stolen money to help former cartel members escape criminal organizations and rebuild legitimate lives through education, job training, and relocation assistance. Programs. Sophia's wedding celebration in Portugal was conducted in 3 languages with Portuguese villagers, American family members, and law enforcement officials who had become genuine friends through years of cooperation and mutual respect. Miguel's specialized armored vehicle business received a major federal contract to provide security modifications for law enforcement agencies combating international organized crime. The family that once lived in fear of cartels now actively helped law enforcement fight criminal organizations. Joe's peaceful daily routine included morning fishing expeditions with local police chief Manuel, discussing philosophy and maritime history rather than crime and violence. Joe had finally found the peace that had eluded him throughout decades of military service and civilian struggle. Agent Santos traveled to Portugal for a personal meeting with Joe after the final cartel prosecutions were completed. "You saved more lives than you'll ever know," she told him during their oceanfront conversation. "The intelligence network you exposed was actively planning to expand into European drug markets. Your actions prevented that expansion and protected millions of people." Joe's legitimate marine repair business employed 6 local residents, including 2 former fishermen whose boats had been damaged by drug smugglers before international law. Enforcement cooperation eliminated the trafficking routes. Joe's afternoon chess matches with retired Portuguese naval veterans had become an established village tradition. The locals affectionately called him O Americano que venceu, the American who won, without fully understanding the scope of his victory over organized crime. Joe regularly received thank you letters from families across America whose loved ones had been saved by intelligence gathered during his 18-month investigation. Each letter confirmed that his dangerous decision to fight back against the cartel had produced lasting positive consequences for innocent people. 5 years after the theft, Joe sat peacefully on his fishing boat at sunset, reading Sophia's latest letter about successful immigration cases that had reunited families torn apart by cartel violence. The original $21 million theft had generated a $200 million impact through seized cartel assets, successful prosecutions, and comprehensive victim compensation programs. Joe wore his Navy Service Medal while fishing, a symbol of service that now encompassed both military and civilian heroism. When a curious young Portuguese boy asked about the medal's significance, Joe smiled and offered simple wisdom. "Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's dangerous and nobody understands why you're doing it." The grease job became permanent legend in both law enforcement and criminal circles worldwide. Joe Montalvo had definitively proven that ordinary people with extraordinary skills and moral courage could defeat any criminal organization, regardless of size, resources, or reputation for violence. Final statistics from the comprehensive investigation: 89 cartel members convicted using Joe's intelligence, $800 million in total criminal assets seized and redistributed to victims, 147 modified vehicles removed from circulation and destroyed, 23 corrupt law enforcement officers exposed and prosecuted, 0 active cartel money laundering operations remaining in Texas or surrounding states. The man who stole $21 million from killers and lived to tell the complete story now spent his days fixing boat engines and playing chess by the Portuguese Sea. Sometimes the best revenge against evil was simply living well while helping others do the same. As the Atlantic sunset painted the Portuguese coast in brilliant colors, Joe smiled while reading about another family reunited through Sophia's legal work, another life saved by the intelligence network that began with a mechanic who dared to fight back against monsters. The grease under his fingernails was honest now, earned from fixing engines that brought fishermen safely home to their families instead of carrying poison across international borders. In the distance, Isabella's letter crinkled in the ocean breeze, announcing the Foundation's latest success helping former cartel members escape criminal life. The $21 million theft had become something far more valuable, proof that ordinary heroes could change the world when they chose courage over comfort. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.